Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy, and I'm your host, Joe Firestone. I have only two topics for tonight. One is BRICS rising, and the other is Israel delays too long. And I'll make it clear what I mean by those in due course. So far, I have no comments, so I have nobody in particular to say hello to. But there are a few folks here, and so I'm going to say hello to you. I'm going to start off with BRICS Rising with a piece from the UN's review by none other than Pepe Escobar. And Pepe published this on October 21st, so yesterday. And it's called Date with Destiny. BRICS offers hope in a time of war. So let's go through this. I'll comment on it. BRICS 2024 is in Kazan, in the Russian Federation. Pepe begins. This is it, a date with destiny all set for the most crucial geopolitical, geoeconomic gathering of the year and arguably the decade. The BRICS summit under the Russian presidency in Kazan, capital of Tatarstan, where Sunni Tatars coexist in perfect harmony with Orthodox Christians. All the excruciating work by Sherpas and analysts throughout 2024, supervised by the lead Russian diplomat in charge of BRICS, Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov, converged to three final separate key meetings in Moscow before the summit, grouping BRICS finance ministers and central bank governors, working groups, and the Business Council. All that is now familiar for the global majority. The combined GDP of the current BRICS nations is over $60 trillion, way ahead of the G7. Their average growth rate by the end of this year is expected to be 4%, higher than the 3.2% global average, and the bulk of economic growth for the near future will come from BRICS member nations. Even before the meeting of finance ministers and central bank governors, Russian Finance Minister Anton Siluanov was stressing that BRICS is keen to bypass, quote, politicized, unquote, Western platforms. A subtle reference to the sanctions, and maybe you should have said a not so subtle reference, to the sanction tsunami and the weaponization of the US dollar, as BRICS work to create their own global majority-friendly international payment system. The context for what will be decided in Kazan this week is no less than incandescent, as the uncontrolled chaos of the hegemon's forever wars from Ukraine to West Asia has even materially affected the heavy work of BRICS and the necessity to build a new international system of geoeconomic relations practically from scratch. Okay. A credible war escalation scenario may have been thwarted by the leak of secret high-level intel to the Five Eyes on the preparations by Israel, the U.S. to strike Iran. The strike will eventually happen with dire consequences, but probably not this week, when it could have been time to explicitly and completely disrupt the summit in Kazan and expel it from global headlines. I'm not sure I agree with the probably not this week, but I'll get to that a little later. The joint statement by the BRICS finance ministers and central bank governors may not sound too adventurous, but the constraints reflect not only caution when facing a dangerous cornered hegemon, but internal contradictions among the BRICS members. At this point, I hope you'll excuse me for a second while I share this on Facebook. I should have done so before, but it slipped my mind. And so there we go. So, looks like there are plenty of people on Facebook at this point. Not all reflected in the indicator that I'm watching, but also very good. Going on with the piece, the statement recognizes, quote, the need for a comprehensive reform of the global financial architecture to enhance the voice of developing countries and their representation. I heard a little sound, thought maybe I was joined by one of my friends. Yet it remains clear that the U.S. has less than zero interest in a profound reform of the IMF, the World Bank, and the Bretton Woods system. Russia and China especially are fully aware that what is needed is a post-Bretton Woods system. The statement is more forceful on the BRICS cross-border payments initiative, dubbed BCBPI, welcoming, quote, the use of local currencies in international trade, unquote, and, quote, the strengthening of banking networks, unquote, to enable them. Yet everything for the moment is only voluntary and non-binding. Kazan is expected to give the process some edge. Quote, not an anti-Western group, just a non-Western group. In his speech at the BRICS Business Council, flicked the wrong button here. In his speech at the BRICS Business Council last Friday, and in a subsequent roundtable with heads of media groups of BRICS members, President Putin, in fact, summed up all the major dossiers. Here are the highlights. On the role of the Shanghai-based NDB, the BRICS Bank, also known as the New Development Bank, which is where the NDB comes from. Russia, quote, will expand the capabilities of the NDB, unquote. The bank should become the main investor in major technological and infrastructure projects for BRICS members and the wider global south. Pepe points out that makes total sense with the NDB financing infrastructure development and commercially involved with local private companies. Incidentally, the next president of the NDB will be Russian. The top candidate is Alexei Mozhin, who was previously at the IMF. So he was a Western banker, I guess, huh? On creating a single digital infrastructure for BRICS, already on. Russia's working on the use of digital currencies and investment processes in the interests of other developing economies, unquote. That ties up with BRICS' work on their own version of SWIFT for international financial transactions, and also ties up with BRICS Pay, a debit card whose first trial run happened during the Business Council last week, not dissimilar to Alipay in China, and soon to be rolled out across BRICS members. A BRICS single currency, quote, not being considered yet. This issue is not ripe yet, unquote. De-dollarization, Putin stressed, is proceeding step by step, quote, we're taking individual steps, one after another. As regards finance, we did not drop the dollar. The dollar is the universal currency, but it wasn't us. We were banned and barred from using it. And now 95% of all the external trade of Russia is denominated in national currencies. They did it themselves with their own hands. They thought we would collapse, unquote. We did think they would collapse. And that was a big, big mistake because it appears that they're stronger than ever. The challenge for a unified BRICS currency, that, quote, requires thorough economic integration, apart from high-level integration among BRICS members. The introduction of a single BRICS currency would involve comparable monetary quality and volume. Otherwise, we will face even bigger issues than those that occurred in the EU, unquote. Putin recalled that when the euro was introduced in the EU, their economies were neither comparable nor equal. Putin will have at least 17 bilateral meetings in Kazan. He emphasized once again that BRICS is not an anti-Western group. It is just a non-Western group, unquote. And he named the key economic drivers in the near future: Southeast Asia and Africa. Development, quote, will objectively take place primarily in BRICS member countries. This is the global south. This is Southeast Asia. This is Africa. Positive growth will exist in powerful countries such as India, Russia, and Saudi Arabia. But the countries of Southeast Asia and Africa will show faster growth for several reasons, unquote. He also highlighted the top infrastructure development projects among BRICS in the global south: the Northern Sea Route, which the Chinese define as the Arctic Silk Road, and the International North-South Transportation Corridor, INSDC, with the BRICS triad, Russia, Iran, India, as the key partners. Now that, of course, is interesting because I thought I understood the BRICS triad was Russia, Iran, and China, but evidently not so in the case of the INSDC. On the Northern Sea route, Putin highlighted how, quote, we are building an icebreaker fleet that has no peers in the world. It's going to be a unique fleet, 7 nuclear icebreakers, and 34 diesel-propelled, high-class, heavy-duty icebreakers. On the Russia-China strategic partnership, it's one of the key factors of stability in the world. In the relations between the two, there are no elders or youngers, quote unquote. On the great chessboard, quote again, Russia does not interfere in relations between the USA and China, unquote, even as, quote, Europeans have dragged into Asia through NATO. Nobody is asking the Europeans whether they want to spoil their relationship with China, whether they want to use NATO entities to enter Asia and to create a situation that would cause concern for the region, for China specifically. Still, they are dragged like puppies, says Mr. Putin. Forever wars target BRICS. There will be a special session on Palestine in Kazan with BRICS members plus BRICS outreach as in partners. Turkey is included. Putin believes that, quote, dissolving the Middle East Quartet was a mistake. The quartet included Russia, the US, the UN, and the EU. In theory, it should have mediated the Israel-Palestine peace process. In practice, it didn't. The notorious warmonger Tony Blair was part of the quartet. Diplomatically, Putin said, quote, I do not intend to accuse the United States in every aspect here, but unfortunately it was a wrong thing to do to disband the quartet, unquote. He reemphasized that, quote, Russia has consistently maintained the view that the UN Security Council's decision to establish 2 states, Israel and Palestine, should be implemented. And significantly, he added that, quote, Russia is in ongoing contact with both Israel and Palestine, unquote. That may be interpreted as strategic mediation and serious back-channel exchanges, yet he did not venture head-on into the fire, just saying he hopes the, quote, endless exchange of blows between Israel and Iran will stop, while adding that, quote, searching for a compromise in the Arab-Israeli conflict is possible, but this is a very delicate area. All of the above is highly significant for the BRICS context because the forever wars in West Asia have been seriously interfering with the work within BRICS, and on top of it, the forever wars, cold, hybrid, and hot, are in fact essentially directed against 3 BRICS members, Russia, Iran, and China, not by accident described as the top 3 existential threats to the hegemon. And that inevitably brings up to Ukraine. Putin emphasized the Russian army has become one of the most combat effective and high-tech armies in the world. When NATO will get tired of waging this war against us, just ask them. We were ready to continue fighting, to continue the struggle, and we will have the upper hand, unquote. Confirming what crack military analyst Andrei Martyanov has been studying for years, Putin explained how modern warfare is the war of mathematicians. something that totally escapes NATO armchair warriors. Quote, I've heard from the people that fight on the ground that today's war is the war of mathematicians. Radio jamming devices would be effective against certain delivery vehicles, and they would suppress them. The other side has, for example, calculated and reckoned what is the counterforce and reprograms the software of its striking assets in a week or 3 weeks, unquote. As for the battleground, with the quote, rules-based international order, unquote, meeting its humiliating humiliating demise in the black soil of Novorossiya. Of course, those are the areas in eastern Ukraine where fighting is going on right now. Putin could not be more emphatic on the quote, nuclear Ukraine gambit. It is a dangerous provocation because any step in this direction will face a response. I will say it outright. Russia will not allow this to happen no matter what. The stakes in Kazan could not be higher. By the end of the week, the global majority will know whether Kazan will go down in history as the landmark of a new emerging system of international relations, or if crass divide and rule tactics will keep postponing the inexorable demise of the old order. And I think in this article, Pepe has directly put his finger on the major conflicts and on the major issues that are surrounding Kazan. And I think he correctly points out that the issue is whether Kazan and the BRICS states will be able to withstand, as he puts it, the crass divide and rule tactics being followed by the West, by the collective West, including, as Pepe has made clear in previous articles, the sponsorship of terrorism in the lands of the BRICS, the actual alliance between the collective West and the existing elements that were derivative of the Al-Qaeda resistance. Now splintered into a number of other resistance groups, but they're all there through West Asia, and they can be recruited by the West for actions in other parts of the world, in Africa, in Ukraine, even perhaps in Latin America from time to time, if the collective West chooses to keep on pursuing the strategy of maintaining the hegemony of the hegemon, specifically the United States. So that's the first of our pieces for tonight. I will take some comments. Steve Day is here. Hello, Steve Day. How are you? D is here. Hello, everyone. Share it to Facebook and X. Thank you, D. Thank you very much. And Willie Bragg Show Dirtbag Leftist says, hello at Joe Firestone, empowering democracy and around the world, D and friends. Thank you, Willie. And Lana says, hi, hi. And Willie says to Lana, hi, Lana Dell hates the clock. And Lana says, how are you, Willie? Seems everybody knows each other. Our attendance is pretty good tonight at this moment where at 56. Please share, like, and subscribe, of course, so we can get a little higher. The game here is always to get a little higher, higher and higher and higher. So let's go to our second piece of the evening, which is also about BRICS rising. Okay, and it's a video, some of which I want to play. This video was from Consortium News. Okay, it's a couple of days old. It was a very long video because it had actually 3 interviews with Pepe Escobar, Scott Ritter, and Mark Sloboda. To some degree, the Scott Ritter and Pepe Escobar interviews involve some interaction among those two and the moderator, who is the editor-in-chief of Consortium News, Joe Loria. And so I'm going to move back a little here. And go close to the beginning. Where Pepe begins to talk about the BRICS. So
that the U.S. will notice this.
I don't think BRICS is going to directly.
That is too far in. It did not take my pushing it back to the beginning for some reason.
First, we need to accommodate the new members, which, by the way, at the moment are 9.5. They are not.
Okay, Pepe was asked the question about what will happen at BRICS. And he points to the problem of integrating the new members, that is the members this year, that are really only 9.5 members, as he is saying. So let's listen to Pepe.
Because Saudi Arabia, of course, is over the wall. And according to Peskov, 2 or 3 days ago, he said that, yes, the status of Saudi Arabia will be defined in Kazan next week. And accommodate the new members. Of course, the list of everybody who wants to apply, join, etc. Now it's reaching 40 nations and counting, of course. They had at least 200 meetings, BRICS related, in Russia this year, which is something enormous. I went to a few of them.
Yeah, that gives you an impression of the intensity of what is going on with all these other nations that have an interest in joining BRICS. But as people said, the first order of business is to integrate the 9.5 members that BRICS has now. The reason why there's 9.5 is because Saudi Arabia has been trying to straddle its close relationship with the United States and its the increasing intensity of its ties, to BRICS. They have not fully integrated with BRICS, as yet. So
and this past week, since last Friday, the 3 most important ones, because these are the final meetings answers your question in a way already. The first one was Friday, 1 week ago, the meeting of the BRICS finance ministers and heads of central banks. Very, very important. You can read their final declaration online at the BRICS site. It is vague. It has to be, because there are still internal contradictions, especially India, China. Goes without saying, right? At the same time, there is we can say it's a list of intentions of what they plan to do, not only in Kazan, but further on down the road. The next year is the Brazilian presidency of BRICS. So the Russians will instruct the Brazilians of, well, this is the most important things, to concentrate on. And this week we had the final meeting of the working groups. There are working groups on literally everything. The most important ones are, of course, alternative payment systems, BRICS Pay, which is their way of evading SWIFT, and de-dollarization. And the final meeting of the BRICS Business Council, which is the bridge between the Sherpas, everything that they discuss politically, economically, and businesses, not only Russian, but Chinese, other BRICS.
Okay, the term Sherpa here refers to the people who are guiding the integration of BRICS and bringing people together across the nations. Of course, the term Sherpa is after the guides in the Himalayas. They're called Sherpas. So the term was appropriated from there, okay, and was brought into to BRICS. There were many Sherpas who were performing the function of bringing people together.
As well. And at the end, of course, we have, at the plenary session, we had Putin speaking, and then what Putin said in his meeting with the heads of different media agencies from different, all over BRICS. And of course, this monopolizes the headline, still monopolizing the headlines, because there are some hints and some nuggets in what he said that we imagine that next week in Kazan, there will be some really straight up announcements on BRICS Pay, which is, they even presented, it was very funny, they presented the BRICS Pay card on Thursday. So with a demo, with 500 rubles inside, which is a little over $5, where you can scan the code. You go to a terminal, you scan the code in a terminal, like Alipay in China, for instance, and that's it. And so this is a trial run. And
this is for consumers. This is for consumers,
yes,
Pepe.
exactly.
Only in the BRICS countries. Yeah.
Exactly, because this is for consumers already. It's fascinating. Yeah. No wonder countries from all over the world are interested. It will become some sort of global Alipay, like, in Asia, in Southeast Asia, where I live. You go to Thailand now, you can pay anything with Alipay now, even in street vendors. So BRICS Pay is something similar. And then the more serious issues, which are cross-border payment settlements, which is already going on. For instance, Russia-China trade balance, I think around 90%, the latest numbers, it's already bypassing the dollar It's in rubles and EU1. So this is expanding all over the BRICS as well, including little by little, of course, much more complicated BRICS that are very close with the international financial system. And then it gets way more complicated. And that's where the key discussion, which is we need alternative payment systems, totally bypassing the international financial system.
Okay, excuse me for a minute. I'm going to try to improve the buffering here that we're seeing. I don't know if it'll work, but I might be able to do it if I refresh the page. So give me a second, please. I seem to have lost it. I was about 7 minutes in. So let's see if that helps.
Still monopolizing the headlines because there are some hints and some nuggets in what he said that we imagine that next week in Kazan, there will be some really straight up announcements on BRICS Pay, which is, they even presented, it was very funny, they presented the BRICS Pay card.
Okay, I'll take this a little forward now.
On these tricky issues is going to be too slow. And this is what the Russians are trying to convince the other partners. Look, we have to accelerate. We already did a lot this year, but the whole global South is watching us. And they want radical measures like yesterday. And this is what may provide us, hopefully.
Every BRICS summit is the most important one they've ever had. This one
no, but this one is this is different, Joe. I've been to a lot before.
Right.
This is a completely different story.
You're talking about the nuts and bolts of creating a whole new financial and commercial system in the world. Now, was this already going on before the sanctions related to the Ukraine crisis?
It was
accelerated. It's only been accelerated by Ukraine.
Exactly, it was, Joe. Of course, they started discussing. To give you an idea, they started discussing this during the second Lula presidency in the late 2000s. Well, this is a long time ago. Long time ago. At the time, Lula was very, very keen on bypassing the dollar, which, by the way, was one of the reasons of the American campaign against him and then Dilma that led to the coup against Lula and to throw Lula in jail. This was key, absolutely key in the whole thing. He actually told Obama that. And that was, considering that Lula is a good strategist, that was a major mistake.
Right.
So, of course, after the SMO, and when the Russians were expelled from SWIFT, of course, and the Russians were already in 2022, the Russians were already thinking about 2024 this year because they knew they will be the presidency of BRICS, and they'll have a super shot to accelerate the whole thing. And that's exactly what happened. But the most interesting discussions, Joe, Scott, is when we talk to some of the Sherpas and some of the guys in the financial sphere who are aware of the discussions. For instance, try to convince the Chinese about the big picture, because Chinese banks, they're absolutely terrified of American secondary sanctions.
Mhm.
So you need to organize bypassing the dollar system that is absolutely foolproof. And so this is what they're trying, but it's medium term, right?
Right.
It's, for instance, with these little things like a card that, anybody around the world can understand what it means. And it starts with the BRICS, and certainly BRICS partners, or what they call BRICS Plus or BRICS Outreach, they will want that the same way, which is something that, and then the system itself, the Russian Ministry of Finance calls it BRICS Pay. I do hope that they explain what is BRICS Pay next week, because still nobody knows what it means. BRICS Bridge, sorry. BRICS Pay is the card. BRICS Bridge is the
Right.
mechanism. And it's based on the M Bridge, which is a system that involves the Bank of International Settlements, the European Central Bank, and the IMF. So it's the enemy. You need a
Right.
different thing. But it's, let's say, it's an inspiration for all the BRICS finance wizards in different countries. Okay, let's come up with our version of M-Bridge. For instance, a very simple example. On M-Bridge, the Thais sell oil, buy oil from the Emirates, I'm sorry, and they don't pay with Thai baht. They pay with this M-Bridge unit. So the BRICS bridge will be something similar. So we hope, all of us, we hope that they will announce something more definitive about it next week. But
That
it's
is
all, yes,
replacing the dollar ultimately. That is the de-dollarization then. Instead of paying
yes,
for oil dollars.
this is this
Yeah.
is one of the nodes of de-dollarization. De-dollarization is an incredibly complex phenomenon, because you have to start from scratch. And
Right.
our friend Michael Hudson has been writing about this
Right.
and talking about this for years.
But
And
this is also like a proto BRICS currency, which is way off. Putin said on yesterday, or Friday
you're right.
rather. This is the proto. Let me move on from the economics, which is extremely important, because this is for a lot of people who are more interested in politics, the more boring part of it, but absolutely necessary to create an emerging new world, displacing the West. And I want to ask you what the Americans think about all this too. But let's talk about politics for a minute. It's a particularly crucial time in the Middle East, obviously. You mentioned, I saw you with the judge, that there's going to be a special Palestinian session. And of course, there's the Iran-Russian relationship and the strategic partnership. Say a few words about the role that the Middle East will play in the summit next week.
Well, we are, Joe, we are all expecting this special session on Palestine. It's not 100% confirmed. It's practically confirmed that they will have a special session dedicated to Palestine, not only with the BRICS, but with the BRICS outreach, the BRICS Plus. This means, for instance, Erdogan will be in this session, because Turkey is applying to be a member of BRICS. And that's another fascinating story. I was in Istanbul a few days ago, and I was asking everybody about it. And it's a Netflix series in itself. Erdogan, what Erdogan really sees in BRICS. Well, we can say that the position on Palestine among, I would say, virtually all the current 9.5 members coincides. There are some who are much more vocal, like Iran and Russia, and other ones like the Chinese. The Chinese, what they have been saying via the foreign minister this past few days is it's not typical Chinese politesse anymore. They're much more forceful than they were months ago, for instance. So uh, the global South expects a BRICS declaration, a consensual BRICS declaration on Palestine. We all hope this is going to happen. It's going to be very, very difficult, but I think it would be an enormous plus for BRICS taking a position, a definitive position on Palestine. From the point of view of Russia, we know it's very complicated. Russians with double passports, all the Russians will live in Israel. The Russians linked to the oligarchs linked to the international financial system. The back and forth of a lot of money. So, but they're trying hard because their patience is already, and this we can see the way Ryabkov and Lavrov are, even their body language when they talk about Israel in Gaza and now in Lebanon. It changed. And it
BRICS
changed,
will condemn.
Um,
Will they name it as a genocide? Will they condemn Israel? You think in a joint communique?
They will never use the word genocide, Joe, but they will use something that will be understood by the global majority as condemning a genocide. And this is what everyone expects here.
Now,
and Putin yesterday, he said something very, very interesting, which is, I would say this is the crux of the Russian position. They have excellent dialogue with Iran for obvious reasons. They're going to sign a comprehensive strategic partnership after the BRICS summit. Pezeshkian is going to come here, and they're going to sign this partnership together. But also they talk to Israel all the time. So I wonder what they listen from the Israeli side. Of course, this you don't see leaks about this here anywhere. But including, of course, those backroom dealers, which are Russian oligarchs working in the international financial system. These are conduits. These are back and forth guys as well. But, you remember a few days ago, I'm sure you all remember a few days ago when Israel bombed a warehouse that they said was Iranian weapons for Hezbollah near the Haimim air base in Syria. The way this was taken here was wow. It was, they said, aha, so now they're about to attack us in Syria as well. And there is, as Scott knows very well, there is an unwritten agreement between Israel and Russia. They don't attack each other in Syria. But this came very, very close. So the whole situation is very fluid, very complicated. The way Putin put it yesterday was in a sense that, look, we are sort of mediators between Israel and Iran. They could be, assuming that the eschatological cult in Tel Aviv listens to anybody, and they don't. That's the problem.
Now, the strategic partnership between Russia and Iran,
the eschatological cult in Tel Aviv, okay, refers to the right-wing people so important in Netanyahu's cabinet. Netanyahu himself, and also Smotrich, okay, and Ben Gvir, and the parties they represent that are so powerful in the Israeli context now. Of course, they're well known for not listening to anybody, but for wanting to go ahead with the program, okay, of Greater Israel.
It won't be like an Article 5 situation where if Iran is attacked,
No,
nothing like that.
not so drastic.
What
But
exactly what will Russia be obligated to do for Iran? Just as a weapons deal, essentially, then.
exactly, we have to wait for the final text, Joe, because they are fine-tuning this text for months. And the deal itself, it's over 2 years that they are discussing it. So it's an enormously complex thing. What is already happening is military interaction. No question about that. And this is something that we heard last year here already. One of those Iranian delegations coming, there are Iranian delegations coming here all the time. One of them, they told us, look, we told the Russians, look, anything you want, military.
Okay, so that's all I'm going to play of this thus far. The major points, okay, I want you to attend to is that BRICS is moving slowly, okay, with respect to the economic aspects of it. They're being very careful about trying to find ways to use the local currencies and to have, an intermediate accounting unit, which is similar to the Enbridge unit, which is used by the IMF and the Bank of International Settlements. They are not moving forward to a common currency right now. That, okay, is very important. The other thing that is very important is that there's an effect on the integration of BRICS that is coming about due to the Middle Eastern conflicts right now. Because, of course, Saudi Arabia is a peripheral actor in that and doesn't want to get too involved in it. Also, the Emirates, okay, in the same way, these nations are important for BRICS, and they're peripheral to the Middle Eastern conflict. But the Iranians are getting more and more central to the Middle Eastern conflict, and they are central to BRICS. So, BRICS is tentatively getting involved. They will probably come out with a statement condemning the actions of the Israelis, okay, as Pepe says. But just what it will say, how it's going to phrase it, these things are not clear yet because everybody is stepping forward with caution at the BRICS level. On the other hand, at the national level, we see the Russians getting more and more involved in terms of their relations with Iran. And we know, and this is going to be important for the rest of the stream, we know they've been shipping weapons to Iran, or I should say military supplies. I want to be specific. For example, they've been giving Iran S-400 air defense systems. I've read somewhere that perhaps they were giving them Su-35 planes as well. Those planes are quite competitive with the F-35s and are a real upgrade in the airplane force. The jet force gave Iran. Iran is very strong in the area of missiles and drones, but they've been operating with airplanes that are very, very dated, with jets that are very, very dated. But now they seem to be getting some jets from Russia that are quite modern, and those things seem to be getting supplied at a fairly fast rate. For example, on October 1st, it wasn't quite so clear that Russia is supplying things to Iran. It's now 22 days later, and it's quite clear they are. Now, we don't know the quantities at this point, but the close collaboration of Iran and Russia includes military collaboration. Now, that has two sides to it that are very important. The one side is it's strengthening Iran on the military front, but it's also creating a situation where the Russians are able to pressure Iran to hold back when it comes to possible retaliations against Israel. So we seem to have a situation developing where the United States is attempting to exert influence on Israel. Okay, and at the same time, we have Russia that is now beginning to influence, what Iran is trying to do, in opposition to Israel. So we have two great powers with two client states, where before October it looked like Iran was more or less an independent actor, and it was just the United States with its particular client state, and it wasn't clear uh, 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 whether the tail was wagging the dog or vice versa. May not be so clear now. But one thing is clear. What the Russians are trying to do is not to give Iran a blank check. But it's also pretty clear that until recently, what the United States has been doing is to give Israel a blank check. But that is not so clear anymore, necessarily. Which brings us to the second part of the stream. Specifically, when Iran attacked Israel on October 1st, Israel made some very aggressive and telling remarks about how it was going to retaliate. And the retaliation was going to be very, very severe. Israel, in other words, responded in its customary aggressive way. But here it is, 22 days later, and a lot of things have happened. First of all, the axis of resistance has gotten tremendously aggressive against Israel. By the axis of resistance, I mean Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Iraqi resistance, the Syrian resistance. They all are lobbing drones, also rockets, and now Hezbollah is beginning to lob very effective missiles, on Israel. And the Houthis are doing that too, but not so frequently yet. But Israel is starting to get attacked. Its cities, Haifa, and Tel Aviv, starting to receive some punishments. The drones are overcoming the air defenses of the Israelis. The Iron Dome is increasingly ineffective. We're getting a situation where Israel is economically in chaos, and the people are running for the shelters. And not only is there economic chaos in Israel, but also political chaos is becoming increasingly serious, inside of Israel. Now, has that been having an effect on Israel delaying its reply to Iran? In other words, is Israel too busy defending itself against the rest of the axis of resistance? Perhaps. But I think there's something else that's in this mix as well. But as we explore what else is involved, we will do that to start with by looking at a piece that appeared in Common Dreams. And that piece is about the famous leaks of documents which occurred. And this article from Common Dreams a detailed portion of the alleged U.S. intelligence document made available on the internet this week, which U.S. agencies are said to be investigating. This is a photo of a screen grab, and it names the agency the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and it's about the Israel Defense Forces continued key munitions preparations and covert UAV activity. That, of course, is unmanned aerial vehicle activity on the 16th of October, almost certainly for a strike on Iran. We cannot definitively predict the scale and scope of a strike on Iran. Such a strike can occur with no further GeoInt warning. That's geospatial intelligence warning. So that was a piece of a document. The headline in this article is Leaked U.S. Intel on Iran Attack Plans Also Confirms Israeli Nuclear Weapons. And the tagline is another of the alleged documents which multiple outlets have been told appear authentic, confirm U.S. spying on Israeli military forces, and shows, quote, a strike on Iran, unquote, is, quote, almost certainly, unquote, coming. Now, this is as of October 20th. We have to note it's now October 22nd, exactly 14 days before November 5th, the end of the election. Going on, this is by John Kelly, who spells his name Queally. An interesting spelling for Kelly. October 20th, 2024. We have not observed indications, quote, this is a quote, we have not observed indications that Israel intends to use a nuclear weapon, unquote. That sentence is the concluding line from an allegedly leaked or hacked U.S. intelligence documents posted online this week and later reported on by Axios, CNN, and other outlets. As Axios reported on Saturday, quote, U.S. officials are extremely concerned about a potentially major security breach after two alleged U.S. intelligence documents about Israel's preparations for an attack on Iran were published by a Telegram account affiliated with Iran. So the leak appeared, on Telegram, on an account that's affiliated with Iran. The Associated Press and independent investigative journalist Ken Klippenstein both cited government sources who said the documents appear to be authentic, while U.S. officials have yet to comment publicly on the material. Reporting confirmed an investigation into their authenticity and how they came to be in the public domain was underway. Since a barrage of missile strikes aimed at military targets in Israel by Iran on October 1st, a retaliatory strike in response to Israel's assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, and other attacks, the world has been waiting for Israel's promised military response. And Dropsite tweeted, and that's the new journalistic venture by Ryan Grimm and Jeremy Scahill, knew a set of classified U.S. intelligence documents purporting to show information about Israel's plans to strike in Iran have been confirmed as authentic in a report by CNN. Dropsite News has also been reviewing these documents since they were posted. To show more, and here is let's see if it's worthwhile sharing this. Let's see if I can get a larger view. It is quite hard to read this, so I am not going to try, but we'll go on with the rest of the article. It summarizes things. Assuming the documents are authentic, what they show is that U.S. intelligence, as is well known, and despite being close allies, keeps a close and clandestine eye on Israeli military operations. CNN cited an unnamed U.S. official who called the documents being made public, quote, deeply concerning, unquote, though the outlet did not publish the documents in full. The documents, according to CNN, are marked top secret and have markings indicating they're meant to be seen only by the U.S. and its, quote, Five Eyes allies, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. And, of course, the United States is the fifth of the Five Eyes. They describe preparations Israel appears to be making for a strike against Iran. One of the documents, which says it was compiled by the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, says the plans munitions moving munitions around. Another document says it is sourced to the National Security Agency and outlines Israeli Air Force exercises involving air-to-surface missiles, also believed to be in preparation for a strike on Iran. CNN is not quoting directly from or showing the documents. It has long been known that Israel has a nuclear weapons program and maintains a nuclear arsenal, but it remains both Israeli and U.S. government policy never to acknowledge or confirm the existence of either. In one of the documents, the U.S. specifically references Israel's ability to deploy a nuclear weapon, though it categorizes the threat of doing so in this case as low. Well, all I can say is I hope they're right. Going on with the article. This is another tweet with a picture of the Pentagon. Independent journalist Ken Klippenstein, recently banned from X for posting an internal opposition research dossier that the Trump campaign had compiled on J.D. Vance, posted images of both documents to his Substack page as he excoriated major outlets for refusing to do so. quote, as with the J.D. Vance dossier, which the entire media knew about but refused to publish, it appears the media has once again lost its nerve and its sense of what's news, unquote, Klippenstein wrote. According to Klippenstein's assessment, the intelligence report includes a rundown of the various aspects of Israeli military activities that the U.S. is monitoring to inform its judgments and conclusions: weapons handling, air defense, ground forces, Navy air, special forces, and even Israel's nuclear forces. But even then, only the weapons handling and special forces category is identified as having a medium, quote unquote, predictive ability in regards to determining Israel's action. The rest are designated, quote, a low, unquote, predictive ability. The second intelligence report is titled, quote, Israel Air Force continues preparations for strike on Iran and conducts a second large force employment exercise, unquote. The document details Israeli activities during an evident, quote, mission rehearsal, unquote, in U.S. lingo that can be indicative of how Israel will strike Iran, citing imagery analysis and other sources. The NGA report notes the Israeli Air Force is already conducting covert drone operations over Iran, evidently doing its own spying, and how, as part of Israeli Air Force activity, has been handling air-launched ballistic missiles, okay, and other weapons. So the Israelis, in part, intend to attack with those kinds of weapons, according to this document. Now, how many ballistic missiles the Israelis have for this, we don't know. They haven't specialized in missile production and missile use, the way that Iran has, and it's doubtful they have even a small fraction of the missiles, which Iran has. Israel has concentrated more on its air force in order to fight for it. Going on, defending release of the full documents, he explained that both provide, quote, insight of enormous public interest as we stand at the precipice of a broader conflict, unquote, and contain, quote, information that directly bears upon U.S. obligations and actions. It is for that reason that I've decided to publish the basic documents, unquote. Okay, and there he goes. A very brave act by Ken Klippenstein, noting especially what happened to Julian Assange when he published some leaked documents that everybody else was refusing to publish. Okay, so there we go on this one. So this is background to a very important issue. And that particular very important issue is whether the Israelis are going to attack Iran before the election here in the United States, and whether that attack, okay, or an Iranian counterattack following that attack would be likely to drag the United States into a war with Iran. That is really critical, I think. And to get some background on that, which I'll talk extensively about later, I want to play part of a further video, which is a video of Judge Napolitano's interview with Scott Ritter this week. I'm sure we'll get some negative remarks about Scott Ritter here, because I know I have some folks here who nowhere near as fond of Scott, okay, as I am. But anyway, here we go on that. I'm going to bring this back first to about roughly 12 minutes in.
Eliminate a cause that resonates in the hearts of millions.
5 words you pronounce wrong. 2 years before your brain starts shutting down. Dementia is an.
Talk to us, please, Scott, about these 2 documents that were released
Sorry, I inadvertently stopped that.
on Telegram. They have all the earmarks of being official American top secret documents. Larry Johnson is convinced they were released officially, that is, by somebody who legitimately had the documents in their hand. This is not the result of any kind of hacking, that they couldn't have been hacked. What are your views?
Well, I can't speak to the origin, meaning hacked or not. They look like real documents. I mean, the way they're structured, the code words, the way they're laid out. This looks like a U.S. government document.
Okay, I have to mention here that, okay, as the judge was saying, Larry Johnson thought, okay, it was a real document. He's former CIA. Scott Ritter, of course, was a former intelligence officer, for the Marines as well. He thinks, okay, it's a real document. Also, Ray McGovern, a very senior CIA person for many, many years, who was in charge of briefing the president for quite a number of years, Ronald Reagan, also thought this document was authentic, that it was a real or these documents, were authentic. So at least 3 highly credible people in the intelligence field, and more as well, who appeared later, on Judge Napolitano's shows, were convinced that these leaked documents were real documents. Going on.
What's interesting, it looks like a U.S. government document that the Israelis aren't aware of. We're monitoring the Israelis. So this is a document that's produced within American circles to advise American leaders about what Israel's doing, because Israel's not talking to us about what they're doing. A couple interesting things out there. They're talking about specific weapons types, munition types, which would give the Iranians invaluable intelligence on how the Israelis plan to attack. If you know the weapon, you know the range of the weapon, you know the attack profile, so you know the aircraft, you can start doing range arcs out there, finding out where they're going to be doing their refueling, where they're going to be launching their attack, and you do your patrols. This is devastating for the Israelis in terms of their attack. They talk about covert drones, again, giving away capabilities.
Okay, so notice how important that could be for the Iranian defense. In other words, if Iran does have some planes right now that can launch air-to-air missiles at a distance of perhaps hundreds of miles, if the Iranians were supplied with some of the Su-35s, from the Russians, then it could be possible that the Iranians could launch missiles at Israeli planes that were refueling on the way over to Iran. By the way, while I talk about this, I also want to mention that it's known that Israel has only 7 tanker planes, 4 refueling jets. We don't know how many F-35s they have at this moment, because it's suspected that there were quite a few of the F-35s the Israelis have that were destroyed by the Iranians, or at least damaged by the Iranians in the attack on October 1st. On the other side, it also may be the case that maybe the planes were damaged on October 1st, but maybe some of them could be fixed up, and that's been part of the reason for delay in the retaliatory attack. Maybe, the Israelis were successful in rehabilitating some of the planes that were hit on October 1st. So these are possibilities that surround the situation, but the main point is here that it may be the Iranians not only have air defense systems that are better in the in terms of S-400s, we know they got from the Russians, but they may also have some more capable planes that can launch air-to-air missiles against the Israeli fighters when they're vulnerable because they're getting gassed up, as it were, in mid-flight, because they have to do that, to get to Iran. It's a long flight to some of the targets, and they have to refuel. And so they're vulnerable during the refueling time. And this document could have been very valuable to the Iranians because it gives them some hints about where and when in the course of their attack the Israelis are going to refuel. It gives them information then about where the Iranian planes can attack them. So this could be very important. It's also significant that the Iranian defenses have probably been strengthened by the military aid which the Russians gave them this month, which they didn't have before. And that will come into some of our calculations about what is likely to happen with respect to an Israeli retaliation, followed by an Iranian retaliation, and how that impacts on the likelihood of the United States getting involved in a war with Iran. That's what we'll be talking about as we move through the rest of this stream. But let us go on with Scott for a
They
while.
talk about nuclear weapons, which is interesting because the United States treats the Israeli nuclear weapons threat as if it's real, as opposed to the Israeli official policy of deliberate ambiguity. This is a devastating document for the Israelis. And I believe it was deliberately released because the United States does not want Israel to attack Iran. So this was an effort done by somebody in the U.S. government, with permission or without permission, to derail the Israeli attack against Iran. Whether they're successful or not, we'll find out.
Will this be a setback for the Israelis? Surely they're not going to carry forward with the plans articulated in the documents now that the whole world has seen the documents, are they?
As I said, it gives away. It's not a specific attack plan, so there's no specifics of which aircraft, how many aircraft, what the exact release points are. The Israelis would have to go back and take a look and maybe extend the range of the airplanes to get them out of predictable launch points, either release from a longer range or coming closer. They'll take a look at their munitions mix to see if there's anything more. But the interesting thing is that it gives specific numbers of weapons systems, which tells the Iranians about targets, and then they can prioritize. So if the Israelis are going to hit, they have 60 weapon systems, that's 60 targets. It just gives the Iranians a lot to go on when it comes to time to plan, or try to predict what the Israelis are going to do. It doesn't prevent an Israeli attack; it complicates an Israeli attack, and I'm sure that they're furious about to the United States about this. But tough luck. I mean, I think this is a signal to Israel that you're not America, you're not one of us, you're not part of our team, especially when you behave in a manner that is detrimental to our strategic posture in the world today. An Israeli attack against Iran would be devastating for the United States economically and for the Biden administration politically, because it would get us involved in a regional war, less than 20 days out of an election where Biden's candidate of choice, Harris, is being opposed by Donald Trump, who says, "I'm not going to get us into a war." I mean, what what makes Donald Trump's message resonate greater than getting into a war that doesn't need to be gotten into? So,
Okay, so a couple of things about that. Scott was talking roughly 20 days before. We're now roughly 14 days before, and we haven't seen, a retaliation yet. Why does that matter? Well, we'll get into that, a little later. But the question you have to ask yourself is, uh, as the clock is running on this, and as we all know that it was one of the objectives of Netanyahu to drag the United States into a war with Iran. It's been an objective for a long time of his, and he's tried in various ways to do that. And the United States has resisted getting involved in a direct war with Iran. We've continued to support Israel strongly with the big bombs they're using to kill so many people. And we're supporting them with the THAAD systems, for air defense. We've given them 2 now, which means we've given them a total of 98 of the interceptors as well. But of course, in THAAD, it usually takes 2 interceptors to down a single missile. So even if there are no misses, even the 2 interceptor systems, each one having 49 missiles, uh, 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 the maximum capability there is to take care of 49 of the Iranian missiles. But, no more than that. 98 missiles, but you need a pair of them to knock out 1 missile. So if Iran attacks, then the THAAD might be good for taking out 49 missiles, but no more than 49 missiles. If the THAAD is not 100% effective, as it might not be against hypersonic missiles, you might be looking at a lot less, than 49 hits. Okay, so we've provided Israel with capabilities they can use to attack Iran, but we have not so far been engaged directly in facilitating an Israeli attack on Iran right now in the form of a retaliation. And this is very significant. We've been holding back in promising that, to the Israelis, because the Biden administration doesn't want to get into a war before the election. Okay, I'm going to go on with the piece.
I think this will help the United States put pressure on Iran, on Israel, and we'll see. But Netanyahu, he's acting not in the interests of Israel, but in his own personal political interests. And so, trying to get in the head of Netanyahu's mission impossible.
Hey, this is Eugene Vindman, and I'm his older brother, Alex Vindman. Today, I'm asking for you.
If you don't mind, let me ask you a couple technical questions, and then I want to ask you to comment on what others have told me. So my understanding from you is this is not a document that was produced by what Mossad revealed to CIA. This is a document produced by what CIA learned by surveilling Mossad and IDF. Is that correct?
Based on the classification level, top secret, and then there were some things in there that I'm really not allowed to comment on. In the public, but I'm not going to mention it. That is based upon surveillance. That's not based upon liaison activity.
So some of this was shared with the 4 remaining members of the Five Eyes: Great Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Some of it was labeled no foreign person can look at it, including the Five Eyes. Now,
Correct.
Do the Five Eyes know that the United States doesn't share everything with them and sometimes keeps information strategically from them?
Absolutely. Look, during the Gulf War, I went to we called it the Gypsy, but it was the Joint Imagery Processing Center where all the imagery comes in. And when you walk in, you have one level where you had your Canadians, your British, your I don't think we had anybody else. Maybe the Australians had somebody in there, but that's where the Five Eyes were. But then you had the inner sanctum, which was American only, because there were systems that we had out there that we don't share with anybody but ourselves. And so, and the other thing about no foreign is it's basically about protecting a source of information. For instance, if you notice, there was someone that said released Great Britain. So we may have received intelligence because the British are doing a heck of a lot of monitoring out of Cyprus. They're doing stuff out there, and the British may have given us intel. And the British have their own little,
Okay, I'm going to
protective
skip
things in a
forward
manner which makes it a whole bunch of reasons why, rather than just jumping and saying this is, the Ten Commandments coming down from Moses, to take a pause and say, how did these documents get produced? Why did these documents get produced? How did the intelligence come about? I'd have a whole bunch of counterintelligence guys going through
Snowden whistleblower type, and he hopes that the person is on his way to Moscow. Larry Johnson is of the view that it was Snowden whistleblower type.
Wait, wait. Let me get this.
counterintelligence guys going through Israeli past practice, looking at patterns of behavior to make sure that they're not deceiving us by doing something, knowing that we're collecting it to try and get our analysts and our policymakers moving in this direction, and then they do something else.
So your friends and colleagues on this show have the following views. Alistair Crook says, quite simply, this was released by somebody who wants to prevent World War III. Ray McGovern says it was released by an Edward Snowden whistleblower type, and he hopes that the person is on his way to Moscow. Larry Johnson is of the view that it was an official release by somebody who legitimately had this in their hands and who represents a segment of the United States government that does not want the U.S. participating in a war against Iran. Where are you, if anywhere, in this spectrum?
I don't think it's a Snowden type person. First, Snowden came out with everything, so this is a very targeted leak of information. The thing about having an official government person do it, again, I don't want to get into too much in this, but when documents are produced at that level, there are things in the document that will indicate who had them, etc. That's the way it used to work. My understanding it still works that way. So there will be something about that document that where the computer has done something so that when you see the document out there, you'll say, okay, this document was released to, this version of the document was released to the following people and aids in any investigation of that. So if this person did that, then there would have to be they would have had to have produced a clean document or something of that nature or something, because it's going to be investigated. This is, if an official person is going to do this, you don't release those documents. First of all, you're doing damage to the United States. Those documents give away sources and methods. They damage intelligence relationships. It's a really bad document to give away. You can give a briefing to the Wall Street Journal or to the Washington Post or the New York Times where you release that same information, but you don't package it in a way that does damage. So I believe that this is a person that wants to stop the war, and they acted on their own volition. And I think this is a person that will probably be discovered and will be arrested and charged with, violating the law, because that's what this is. It's a violation of law. I know why they did it. And I can't say that I'm against them doing it, but as a former intelligence person, releasing that document did a lot of damage, a whole bunch of damage that goes beyond simply trying to stop Israel from, it gives away monitoring capabilities. The Israelis were able to reverse engineer that, figure out exactly what we can do. Overhead, I don't want to, again, it just gives away capabilities that are highly protected and should never be given away. There's a better way to release this information than releasing the documents, which tells me this was more of an amateur effort to stop a war as opposed to something official.
Are the Israelis preparing to attack Iran in a substantial way?
There's no doubt about it. The Israeli military, like any military, prepares certain capabilities. During the Gulf War, Israel was actively preparing to send in multiple brigades of combat forces into Western Iraq, backed up by helicopters and military aircraft. They had a plan ready, they had the troops ready, but they never executed that plan because of the political pressure put on them by the United States. But the Israeli military was ready to do that. There's no doubt in my mind that the Israeli military is ready to attack Iran once the order is given. That's their job. Their job isn't to get political. Not at least not the people who are planning it. The political guys are the ones who are telling the boss, hey, when you do this, things are going to happen. We can't defend. It's going to be a mess. You may not want to do this. But when they're told to prepare to do something, they have to do this. So there's no doubt in my mind that the Israelis have prepared several options. Plan A, Plan B, Plan C. Mr. Prime Minister, these are the options we have to execute the operation that you've told us to get ready to do.
Do you think that the United States of America is ready to, I got to strike that, the Biden administration is ready to back up this invasion of Iran, irrespective of the natural and probable consequences to the United States of such a maneuver by us?
They thought surgery was the only way to fix this until this happened.
No. I don't know what they're going to do if Israel attacks. But I have a feeling that the United States, we're going to do everything we can to tell the Iranians we had nothing to do with this. Because if our fingerprints are on this, understand that it is the death sentence for thousands of Americans. They're very vulnerable right now in the region. They're in bases that can't be protected from Iranian missiles, and the Iranian missiles will hit them. And this time it'll be done in a way that is designed to generate casualties. And depending on how this.
Okay, so that statement is a very important statement. Scott's opinion from watching the politics, and it's my opinion too also, is that there are elements inside of the U.S. government which now hold sway that do not want to get into a war with Iran. That has become even more the case since it has become known that the Iranians are getting increasingly closer to the Russians and are about to sign a mutual support treaty. Let's call it a strategic partnership treaty. Okay, it's not a tight alliance where if one party is attacked, the other party is obligated to immediately come to its aid. But it's the kind of close relationship where certainly the Russians are going to supply arms to the Iranians and perhaps other kinds of support, including diplomatic moves and threats of various kinds. In other words, the situation has developed now so that if the Israelis retaliate, it's not simply the Iranians who are going to be involved, and not also simply the axis of resistance that's going to be involved, but Russia is going to be involved also and will be taking certain actions in support of Iran. So this is a factor that has to be kept in mind by the United States when it is contemplating how much to support Israel. Now, my belief is that what's going on inside of the U.S. government is that while in earlier periods of the Gaza war, the people who were most prominent in determining the decisions of the president were probably Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, and maybe Amos Hochstein, the former Israeli IDF soldier, who's now a high-ranking operative in the State Department. While they might have been their advice might have been controlling decision making at an earlier time. Now, since the question is whether we may have to get into a war with Iran in support of Israel, certain other people are brought into close conferencing, and chief among those is Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, who undoubtedly gets asked questions by the president. What is our capability to do this? What is our capability to do that? What is our capability against Iran? What are the likely options, for Iran to retaliate? What are the likely consequences of that? Lloyd Austin becomes much more important as a political decision maker in this particular situation. We also know that Lloyd Austin held back a decision of Joe Biden when it came to approving uh, 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 the Ukrainians' use of the ATACMS in the Ukrainian war. That use had been restricted somewhat, and the issue was whether those restrictions were going to get removed. Austin said no, and that turned out to be the controlling opinion, even though Keir Starmer was on his way to the United States to get Biden to sign off on certain targets in Ukraine, that would be ATACMS targets. And Austin torpedoed the whole thing. And Biden was obviously very angry about it, but he went along with Austin because Austin is the Secretary of Defense and he knows what the capabilities are of the various sides. Now, he has knowledge of that also in connection with the Middle East and what the Iranian capabilities are in the Middle East, what the Russian capabilities are in the Middle East. And he would be advising the president on whether we could do certain things in the Middle East and what the consequences of those things would be. So he comes into the situation, I believe, as a critical decision maker, perhaps the most critical, well, perhaps I should say, as the most critical advisor here with respect to Joe Biden as to how far Joe Biden should go in supporting Israel. In other words, whether Joe Biden should grant the wish of Netanyahu that the United States would go full bore in support of Israel, whatever Israel decides to do in retaliating, against Iran. In other words, the issue uh, is Lloyd Austin advising Joe Biden to give to Netanyahu a blank check, or is he advising Biden to put certain constraints on, on Netanyahu and to follow through on those constraints, be consistent with them and not cave later, depending on what the Iranians do to the Israelis? So those kinds of considerations become very, very important here. Obviously, it's Scott's opinion. It's my opinion, too, that the United States has made it clear that it doesn't want to get involved in a war with Iran, that it will support the defense of Israel in the strict sense of defense in case of Iranian attack, but that it will not attack Iran on behalf, of Israel. And one understands why, it will not attack Iran, because all those U.S. bases surrounding Iran, with all told roughly 40,000 U.S. military personnel in them, are hostage to the Iranian missiles right now. In other words, they used to be forces that surrounded Iran and that represented threats to Iran. But increasingly, as the years went by and the Iranians developed their missile forces and their drone forces and their capability in this area, these bases have become hostages to the power of Iran. And that is what we are seeing now. And when Scott refers to possible fatalities among a large number of Americans, he's referring uh, uh, to the military people on these bases who are vulnerable to attack from the axis of resistance and from Iran itself. And so that becomes a very important consideration if Biden's decision making in terms of whether he wants to go forward with the war, against Iran. Okay, let me go a little further with this, and then I'll get into the windup of
This
this
attack is done,
stream.
overflight of Saudi airspace, things of that nature. And depending on what target mix is gone after, this could, basically disrupt Middle East oil production. And
Okay, here I have to point out that it's very significant that in terms of an Israeli attack against Iran, the Israelis have to use the airspace, okay, of other nations. Iran has made it known to the other nations in the Gulf, okay, that if any of them allows the Israelis to use their airspace, for further attack on Iran, uh, that Iran will feel free to retaliate on those nations. That was a threat to Jordan, to the Emirates, to the Saudis, to the Iraqis, to the Syrians, to any nation whose airspace might be used by the Israelis to facilitate such an attack on Iran. They've been warned that they will be the subject, okay, of Iranian attack if they do this. So it's very unlikely that any of them are going to give consent to Israel to fly over. And some of them may actively oppose Israel in terms of their defense missiles and attacks on the Israeli planes as they are going over. Depends on how powerful the adversaries are and how close they want to be to Iran at this moment. And here we have to point out that the Saudis have been getting much closer to the Iranians for some time now, and also have now the closeness of being members of BRICS, important members of BRICS, and wanting to work with the Russians and the Iranians on common projects for the prosperity of all. There's considerable incentive for the Saudis to align themselves with the Iranians in such a conflict. Of course, they'll try not to do that. They'll try to be neutral, but it may be a very active neutrality against the Israelis using their airspace. So that has to be taken into account here too. So let us go a little further.
and that's the end of the economy. And so, and Biden again understands this. When he says he doesn't want Donald Trump elected, I think he means it. This isn't just, but he personally believes that Trump is going to be bad for America. And so, why would you then throw away the election? If you personally believe that, if Iran is attacked by Israel, it will very much seal the fate of Kamala Harris in this election. It'll be over, done. I mean, she's not doing too well right now, anyways, but this will be America going to war. She's the vice president. She'll be blamed. This will be the economy going to hell. She's the vice president. She'll be blamed. I think Biden will also, he can't let the Israelis think that they can do things that will harm America and get away with it. So I think that we're looking at, the real potential of consequences if Israel goes through with this attack. We're not going to be a part of it.
But doesn't.
Okay, so I'm going to leave this video there and go on with my own considerations. I raised the issue of whether Israel had actually delayed too long in relation to the retaliation, against Iran. I also have to add that this was not only a decision of the Israelis, because obviously the Biden administration has been trying to hold them back since October 1st by telling them Biden administration would only do certain things to support them, but not other things to support them. The reason why that, is relevant, of course, is because it has contributed to the Israeli delay. It has contributed to the Israeli delay. And the question I've raised is whether the Israelis have delayed too much, too long, and I believe that they have. Specifically, when I say that, I note there are 14 days, until the election. As far as I know, the Israelis have not attacked this evening. If I'm wrong, please correct me on that. But that means that at least the earliest they're going to attack is going to be tomorrow, which is 13 days before the election. Okay, now if they do attack, 13 days before the election, that's going to create a situation where the question arises, will the Iranians immediately attack? Now, on October 1st, I had the opinion that after the Iranians attacked on October 1st, they were ready for an immediate retaliation by the Israelis. And the way they got ready was that they put everything on automatic. They had their targets already selected. They had their missiles in place to fire, that they were prepared in case of an immediate Israeli attack, that they were ready to fire away with their missiles even before the Israeli planes got to Iran. Because, of course, they would have an early warning from radars and things like that. And I had the feeling their missiles were going to beat the Israeli missiles to the punch. But since October 1st, other things have happened, including the arrival of Russian aid but to the Iranians, and also lots of discussions with the Russians about things that were going on inside of the Middle East. So my feeling is now that that might have introduced different thinking, on the part of the Iranians. Why? Because the aid the Russians gave to them increased their possibility to be able to take a punch from the Israelis and still reply. Specifically, if their air defense was improved by the Russians, if their attack capabilities and their abilities to attack the Israeli F-35s while they were refueling was increased by the military aid the Russians gave to them, then it seems to me that gives the Iranians more options, and they might have changed their posture somewhat so that they were no longer planning for an attack even before the Israeli planes actually got there. If they now have the impression that they would be able to degrade the offensive capability of the Israelis when the retaliation is underway, then that gives them further options to manage the ladder of escalation. In other words, they could wait for the Israeli attack, look for success in degrading the Israeli attack, and wait, okay, to retaliate to see how serious the damage was. If the damage is less serious, then the Iranians would be free to reply instead of actually replying with an all-out attack of 2,000 missiles that would degrade the whole of Israeli infrastructure, destroy their economy and destroy Israel as a society. They might decide, that they didn't want to do that, that they would simply reply with a more measured retaliation and see if they could persuade the United States not to get involved on the Israeli side. That might be something that would make sense to them, and especially make sense to them because, of course, the Russians, we're pretty sure, have been urging them to be cautious and be moderate and be restrained in their responses. And the Russians gave them some capability that allow them to be more restrained. If that's the case, then the Iranian retaliation might, first of all, take a few days. Let's say, for example, the Israelis attack on the 13th, and the Iranians degrade their capability by half in the process of, their attack. So their attack is less devastating on Iran by a half, or something like that. Okay, then the Iranians might, first of all, feel that they can afford to wait a few days, okay, to retaliate. So instead of retaliating, let's say the Israelis attack on the 13th day, and the Iranians decide, instead of deciding they're going to immediately retaliate, even while the Israeli forces are in the air, they decide to wait. Then they might also decide that they would wait themselves 3 or 4 or 5 days to plan their attack very, very carefully, on the Israelis. That brings us down then to the 8th day before the election, and they wouldn't have attacked. Now, of course, the Iranians might think, well, maybe they'll wait till after the election to attack, so as not to get the Biden administration into the situation of being tempted to get involved with Iran, to get involved with the Israelis in attacking Iran before the election is over. In other words, if the Israelis have attacked and the Iranians wait to retaliate, the election is over on November 5th, provided the Israeli devastation is not as serious as everyone expects, which it may not be due to the military aid that's been given to the Iranians, and to the fact that they have their own secret weapons that they've been threatening to use. Now, I know they have some more advanced hypersonic missiles they have not used. And I also think they may have some new airplanes ready, which are the equivalent of F-35s and Su-35s that they would be able to use, that they've been working on now for some time. Now, I don't know for sure that they have this, but I think they may have this. Also, I'm sure they've been working on nuclear weapons for some time. They're probably pretty close to having them. So that might also give them pause in terms of immediate retaliation, against Israel. So here's a possibility. The Iranians might not retaliate until after the election. of November 5th. Because, of course, the Iranians would much prefer to have a Democratic administration in there than have Trump coming back into the presidency. That's quite clear, don't you think? So therefore, they have an incentive to wait for the retaliation. Okay. But even if they take, say, let's say 4 or 5 days, and so their retaliation comes 8 days before the election, then the Biden is certainly in the position of waiting for 8 days before it decides whether it's going to join Israel or not, join Israel. Furthermore, it won't have the pressure of the election in making that particular decision. So if it postpones that decision until after the election, then the Biden administration might well decide it's not in the interests of the United States to attack Iran at this point, that the Iranians, within their rights, to retaliate against the Israelis. And this issue is between the two of them, and we're not going to get offensively involved. They could well make that decision after the election. They don't pay any price for making that decision. So what I'm saying is that the incentives are now aligning both on the Iranian side and by the U.S. side, that in case of an Israeli attack, there might be a freezing of the conflict at that point until after the election. And therefore, whether the Biden administration decides to go on the offense against Iran will not encounter the pressure, of the people in this country who keep taking the position, my Israel, right or wrong. I mean, it's as if Israel is their country. So there's that. So that's my reasoning. That's why I think the Israelis have delayed for far too long. I think the Biden administration will have the option to not engage. And if it has the option to not engage without paying a political price, I believe it will not engage, because Lloyd Austin will advise the President of the United States, if we have a war with Iran in the Middle East, with Iran backed by Russia in the Middle East, we will not be successful in that war. We will lose that war. We will lose our bases in the Middle East. We will lose a lot of our naval capability in the Middle East. We are not ready for that kind of war. If you really want to fight that kind of war, you have to build up and come back to me in 4 or 5 years. But right now, we are not ready for that kind of war. I think that's what Austin is going to tell Biden. And I think Biden is going to listen. And I think, therefore, that Israel has waited too long, to retaliate. Steve Wolfbrand says, Kamala cannot even express a coherent thought. Steve, I'm sorry. You're going nuts with Kamala derangement syndrome. KDS, Kamala derangement syndrome. I mean, don't be silly. Trump is much more in the bag of not even expressing a coherent thought. I mean, everybody knows that. Even you must know that. John B., I suspect the October 1st attack was a revelation of inadequacy of Israeli defense. They feared the devastation of Iran's response. I agree. In fact, since October 1st, the inadequacy of Israeli defense has been proven anymore because Hezbollah is hammering them. I mean, Hezbollah has been getting through day after day after day, they've been getting through. So I think they do fear the devastation of Iran's response. The Russian advisors have great patience. Pressure for an internal coup waits. And I think there is that kind of pressure also. Patiently for pressures of economic collapse to take effect, yes, that is another factor. Steve Day says, yes, Steve, HHH. I don't know what HHS means. And Lana Dale says, Steve is in the house. Which Steve? We got a lot of Steves in the house right now. Steve Wolfbrand says, yes, I am, Lana, and leaves 2 hearts. Steve Day says, hi, Bonnie. Hi. And Bonnie says hi in return. So, folks, that's my stream for tonight. And I'm sticking with it until reality proves me wrong. But we will have to see what happens. I dare say we will know by November 5th whether I was wrong or not. Now, note again, I'm not saying the Israelis will not retaliate before November 5th. They may, but I think that they've waited too long to bring the most pressure on the Biden administration to join them. The closer and closer we get to the election, the less and less is the pressure on the Biden administration to join the Israelis in an offensive effort, against Iran. I think Netanyahu has overplayed his hand, and that he's going to lose this one. Lana says, "Oops, I didn't see Steve Day in the YouTube comments." Okay, I'll wait to see if there are any more comments. If not, I'm going to say goodnight. And I'll come back on Thursday. I'm not sure what kind of show I'm going to have on Thursday. Thank you all for coming tonight. I see that in the indicator here, there are 81 people still here. The indicator tends to underestimate how many people are watching the show. So that's good. And Steve says, until reality proves you wrong, it won't be long, Doc. We shall see. And Dee says, good night, all. And Lana says, have a good night. Yeah, you too, Lana. Okay, everybody. Thank you once again for joining. And I'll see you again on Thursday. I'll probably see you on Dee's show on Thursday also, because I'll be coming back at 8 o'clock. And I'm sure I'll stay around for Dee's show on Thursday as well. So good night, everybody.